Zane's interest in real estate started from modest roots. Growing up in a humble family, he couldn't afford college, so he pursued a career in construction. With a strong work ethic and talent for craftsmanship, he thrived in the industry and quickly recognized the investment potential in real estate. His first renovation project began when he spotted a rundown condo on a job site. Intrigued, he bought and restored it, sparking his passion for buying, renovating, and selling homes. The early years were tough. Zane worked long hours, managing multiple projects while learning real estate. His dedication paid off, earning him a reputation for transforming neglected properties into valuable homes. This success brought financial stability, allowing him to take on bigger projects and eventually become a self-made millionaire. Despite his success, Zane stayed grounded, always looking for the next opportunity. Zane loved every part of the process, from buying to selling. He saw each purchase as a bargain and took pride in selling properties at a profit, confirming his eye for value. By age 52, after more than 30 years of renovations, Zane was an expert in his trade, living mortgage-free in a beautifully restored home he had bought at a great price. His renovations doubled the property's value, giving him financial freedom to pursue future deals. Zane's entry into real estate was almost by chance. While working in an area with affordable condos, he noticed one in disrepair with a "for sale" sign. After talking to the realtor, he learned the two-room condo was severely damaged and priced at $150,000, while similar condos sold for $225,000. Zane estimated he could renovate it for $25,000 to $30,000, but didn't have the full $150,000. With the realtor's help, he secured a reconstruction loan. After navigating a lengthy approval process, Zane became the proud owner of his first real estate investment. Since Zane had a full-time job, he could only work on the condo in his spare time, which slowed down the renovations. He hired some workers, but they did poor quality work, so Zane had to fix their mistakes. This cost him time and money, as he was still paying for the mortgage, insurance, utilities, taxes, and condo fees. To speed things up, Zane took 2 weeks off work, dedicating 12-hour days, including weekends, to finish the job. He encountered unexpected issues, like needing to replace the entire air conditioning system, adding thousands in unplanned expenses. Zane listed the condo before it was fully renovated, and a neighbor offered to buy it for his mother. Zane let the buyer choose the colors and carpeting, and when the work was finished, the condo had new tile, wood floors, cabinets, appliances, and an air conditioning system. The buyer agreed to the $250,000 asking price. Zane had invested $40,000 in the renovation, including paying professionals for high-quality work. After closing costs and realtor fees, Zane made $35,000 in profit within 3 months. He was pleased with his first investment and learned valuable lessons for future deals. Zane attended real estate seminars, learning about hard money lenders, who offer quick loans for renovations, but at high interest rates. Though expensive, these loans could be processed quickly, eliminating long waits for traditional bank loans. To streamline his process, Zane became a licensed realtor, gaining access to the Multiple Listing Service, MLS, which allowed him to find and make offers on properties independently. He also earned commission on both buying and selling properties. Over the years, Zane bought, renovated, and sold many properties, starting with condos and gradually moving to larger homes. By saving his profits, he was eventually able to buy houses with cash, speeding up transactions and securing better deals from motivated sellers. Zane began outsourcing renovations to a trusted contractor and focused solely on finding and purchasing properties. At one point, he had several homes in different stages of renovation. By then, Zane had amassed a net worth of over $1 million, mostly in cash, and consistently earned a six-figure income. Despite his wealth, he lived modestly, with few people knowing his true financial status. 5 years after becoming a major figure in real estate, Zane married Bryce Beaumont, a beautiful woman from a wealthy family. Though they initially noticed his lack of formal education, Bryce's family respected Zane for his success and hard work. The couple had 3 daughters, Andrea, Angelica, and Ashley, who were all grown with children of their own. The family made it a tradition to gather for holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving, though only Andrea lived nearby. Bryce worked as a materials manager at a manufacturing company, ensuring that the necessary resources were ordered and available on time. She coordinated with many vendors and suppliers and was skilled at her job, which she enjoyed. On a Friday, Zane had just closed a deal on a middle-class home in a working-class neighborhood. The previous owners were an elderly couple. The husband had recently passed away, and their children, living 1,500 miles away, planned to move their mother into a nursing home. They needed to sell the house, which was in poor condition and a slow seller. A realtor colleague recommended Zane as a buyer interested in renovation. Zane inspected the house and saw that the foundation, roof, electrical system, and HVAC all needed work. The yard was neglected and the driveway had cracks. The house was still full of furniture and kitchenware, with the garage packed with catering equipment, suggesting the couple may have run a business. The children knew similar homes were valued at $315,000, but Zane offered $250,000, explaining that at least $50,000 in renovations would be needed. Since the house was fully paid off, the children agreed to split the profit. The deal closed the following Friday, and Zane had the keys by 3:30 p.m. Instead of going to his office, Zane went straight home, planning to celebrate with Bryce. Her car was already in the garage, which was unusual. Inside, he found no greeting. After pouring himself 2 shots of rum, he heard the shower running upstairs. When he entered the bedroom, he saw cocktail dresses, lingerie, high heels, and fishnet stockings laid out. Bryce's perfume and red lipstick were on the dressing table. Confused, Zane sat and waited. When Bryce emerged from the shower, wrapped in a towel, she didn't notice Zane. She began powdering herself and had styled her hair into voluminous curls, with her nails painted bright red. "What's happening?" Zane asked calmly. Bryce jumped and let out a small scream. "Zane, you scared me! I didn't know you were home." "I closed the deal early and decided to come home instead of going back to the office," Zane said. "I thought I might take you out to celebrate, but it seems like you already have plans." "So, what's going on?" "Yes, darling," Bryce replied. "I'm going out to dinner with a friend." Zane stayed calm but pressed further. "Judging by the clothes you laid out, it's not just a friend. You're going out with a man, right? And I see you've got dancing shoes, so you're going dancing too?" "Yes, darling," she admitted. "We thought we'd go dancing to make the evening fun." "Who's this friend?" Zane asked. "Oh, his name is Harvey Rankle. He's a sales rep for the company we buy paper from. He's in town once a month, and we've had lunch a couple of times. He's very nice, polite, and attentive." Bryce quickly added, "It's not really a date, just dinner and chatting with a friend." Zane, sensing she was being evasive, changed tactics. "Which dress are you wearing?" "I'm not sure. Maybe you can help me decide," she said. "Red will definitely catch a man's eye, though it's a bit flashy for a first date. But no man can resist a sexy black cocktail dress," Zane commented. "You haven't dressed like this for me in a long time. What's special about tonight?" "Black it is," Bryce said, ignoring his question. Zane realized it had indeed been a long time since she dressed this way for him. He hadn't taken her out dancing in ages, falling into a routine of simple dinners when he closed a deal, usually at local spots like Red Lobster or TGI Fridays. Feeling unsettled, Zane excused himself to pour another drink. As he sipped his rum, he considered the situation. Bryce was clearly going on a hot date, despite trying to downplay it as just dinner with a friend. Her preparations told a different story, and Zane wondered why she thought he would accept it so easily. When he returned, Bryce was pulling thigh-high stockings over her legs. "These are new, aren't they?" Zane asked. "Yes, I bought them today to go with my dress." "It's been so long since you've dressed like this for me," Zane said. "Why all this effort for a random friend?" "I just wanted to look good," Bryce replied, trying to sound casual but not convincingly. "You know, you don't even need a bra with that dress," Zane remarked. "Just be careful not to fall out of it when you bend over." "Good point," Bryce said. "I'll skip the bra and be careful, just like you said." Zane realized that Bryce assumed he was fine with her evening plans, and she started involving him more in her preparations. She seemed to think he might even enjoy the idea of her going out with another man, but she was wrong. "I was thinking of wearing my diamond necklace and earrings. What do you think?" she asked. "Stick with black to match the dress," Zane suggested. "How about the black sapphire pendant? It'll hang perfectly between your bosoms, and the matching earrings will complete the look." Bryce agreed, pleased with his suggestion. While Zane appeared calm, inside he was boiling with anger. After Bryce put on her cocktail dress, she asked Zane to button it. She admired herself, showing off her leg, and packed her dancing shoes in her bag. Before leaving, she asked Zane to bring her half a glass of spiced rum, saying she felt restless. Zane sensed that Bryce wanted to leave him alone in the room for a moment. "Of course, it's going to be an exciting night for you," he said, leaving the room with the door slightly ajar. As he glanced back, he saw Bryce quickly grab something from his nightstand and put it in her purse. Though he didn't see exactly what it was, he knew. He went downstairs, poured her rum and a double glass for himself. When he returned, Bryce was seated at her dressing table. "Thank you, darling," she said, sipping the drink. "I've never seen you look so beautiful and sexy," Zane remarked. "Thank you," Bryce replied. "I'm glad you understand. I promise to make it up to you. Maybe soon we can dress up, go to dinner and a show, then come home for a passionate night together." "We'll see," Zane replied indifferently. Bryce stood up, saying, "I have to go. I don't want to be late." As they reached the front door, Zane asked, "Before you go, let me take some photos of you." "I'd love that," Bryce agreed, posing for the camera. Zane directed her to stand by the door, turning sideways like a model. He took some photos, then added, "Now lean forward, but be careful not to fall out of the dress. Lift the hem so I can see more leg and the top of your stockings." Bryce complied, and Zane captured the shots. Bryce, feeling overly confident, complied with Zane's request for more photos. After checking her watch, she said, "I really need to go. Don't wait up for me." Zane calmly replied, "Don't worry, I won't." Before leaving, Bryce asked, "Kiss me and wish me a nice evening." She leaned in, asking for a kiss on the cheek to avoid smudging her lipstick. Instead, Zane slapped her hard across the right cheek. Bryce stumbled back, shocked and in pain, her expression filled with disbelief. "Zane? Why?" she asked. Zane stepped closer. "Did you really think I'd be okay with my wife going on a date dressed like that?" Bryce, confused, said, "But you seemed fine with it. You even helped me." Zane slapped her other cheek just as hard. Now frightened, Bryce stood in shock. "In what world would I tolerate such disrespect?" Zane demanded. "Did you really think I'd let you run off like this?" Tears welled up in Bryce's eyes. "It was just dinner," she sobbed. Zane grabbed her purse and found a pack of rubbers. "You took these when I went downstairs, didn't you?" Bryce tried to explain. "They were just in case. I wasn't planning on using them." Zane, holding back his own emotions, replied angrily, "You've misjudged me." Bryce begged for forgiveness, offering to cancel her plans, but Zane wasn't moved. "Stay, and I'll punish you," he warned, shoving her coat and purse into her hands. "Get out now. Don't come back until tomorrow." He forced her out the door, took her house key and garage remote, and pushed her into the car. "Go stay with Andrea or find a hotel, I don't care," he said. Bryce, realizing how serious he was, drove off in tears. Zane watched her leave, then returned inside, noticing her dancing shoes left behind. She won't need them tonight, he thought. Feeling exhausted, Zane poured himself another drink and collapsed into his chair. Overwhelmed with a mix of emotions, anger, humiliation, and sadness, he started to cry. Realizing he needed to take action, he considered kicking his wife out by packing all her belongings into trash bags. However, he soon realized that task would take too long. As he sat in his chair, a simpler solution came to him. He had just bought a fully furnished house earlier that day, complete with utilities and Wi-Fi. Smiling to himself, Zane decided to move in. He packed a few essentials, clothes, his laptop, and other equipment, into 2 suitcases and was ready to leave by 11 p.m. He placed the house key and garage remote on the kitchen table and drove in silence to his new home, just 45 minutes away. When he arrived at the dark cul-de-sac, he parked next to the side entrance and let himself in. The house was clean but in need of repairs. As he walked through the rooms, he noted what needed upgrading: kitchen cabinets, flooring, appliances, and light fixtures. Though he usually renovated houses quickly, he planned to take his time since he intended to live there for a while. Zane unloaded his car, noting that half the storage space was still occupied by the previous owner's belongings. The family had taken only sentimental items, leaving behind furniture and an old computer in the former office. Zane set up his computer in that space. Feeling the effects of his drinks, Zane grabbed sheets from the linen closet, made the bed, and exhausted, fell asleep in his shorts. The next morning, Zane woke early as sunlight filled the room. He hadn't closed the curtains. With a slight hangover, he showered, dressed casually, and made coffee using the old-fashioned coffee maker left by the previous owners. He found a jar of coffee in the pantry and was pleased with the gas stove, despite its age. As he drank his coffee, he explored the kitchen, finding it stocked with pots, pans, utensils, glassware, and 2 sets of china. He learned later that the previous owner had inherited both her mother's and mother-in-law's china. Zane made a simple breakfast, cleaned up, and then checked out the garage, which was packed with catering equipment, likely from the previous owner's catering business. The backyard had a nice, partially enclosed patio with hanging plants and outdoor lamps, though it needed some sprucing up. An old rusty barbecue sat in the corner, which Zane planned to replace. After inspecting the property, Zane made a plan to renovate. He organized a sale for items left behind, donating or discarding what didn't sell. He also noticed the yard was overgrown with grass, the brick flower beds were cracked, and the driveway needed repairs. The concrete block walls separating the property were also damaged. Zane called his contractor, Cesar Quintero, to discuss the renovations. While waiting for Cesar, he met his first neighbor, Lee, a Vietnamese widow, and her elderly mother. Lee offered to introduce Zane to the neighborhood, which he appreciated. When Cesar arrived, he and Zane reviewed the house and noted the necessary work. Cesar commented that the house had the least curb appeal on the street and agreed it needed significant upgrades. As they walked the cul-de-sac, they noticed other homes also needed repairs. After planning the renovations, Cesar left, and Zane was alone again. Zane turned on his phone and saw several missed calls, mostly from his wife, starting around 2 p.m., likely when she returned home. Her voicemails were filled with pleas for forgiveness, begging him to talk to her, saying she was sorry for disappointing him. The last message was from his daughter, Andrea, asking what he had done to her mom. She mentioned that her mother had told her Zane had moved out and even strike her. Andrea urged him to return home and fix things. Zane called Andrea back. She confronted him, but he asked if her mother had told her why he left. When Andrea said it couldn't have been that bad, Zane explained that her mother had effectively left him first. He asked Andrea to get the full truth from her mom before they talked again. Andrea agreed, mentioning her mom was staying with them for a few days. Over the next 3 days, Zane didn't hear from Andrea. During that time, Cesar began repairing Zane's yard, fixing the walls with decorative block caps. Without asking, Zane also had Cesar repair the walls around the neighborhood, which earned him thanks from his neighbors. Zane also had Cesar's crew fix the driveways on the cul-de-sac, applying protective coatings. Although the cost wasn't small, Zane felt it was worth it for the property value boost. Zane organized a sale to get rid of the leftover clutter, and the event was a success. While cleaning up afterward, Andrea called him. "Dad, we need to meet. There's more you don't know," she said. Zane replied, "I know what I saw." Andrea insisted, saying her mother had told her everything and that she didn't blame Zane for his actions. She even scolded her mom for how she treated him. Andrea offered to meet Zane to discuss more details, which she said were important. Zane, feeling her emotional distress, agreed to meet at TGI Fridays near her house at 11 a.m. the next day. They exchanged "I love yous" before hanging up. The house renovation continued, and Zane ordered new windows. Many of the house's windows were painted shut and couldn't be opened. He also ordered French doors with additional screen doors for the family room and master bedroom. Zane entered TGI Fridays right at 11 a.m. His daughter was already waiting in the lobby. They hugged and requested a corner table. Both ordered coffee. There weren't many people in the restaurant at this time of day. Zane got straight to the point. "What do you want to talk about, Andrea? If this is about what I did after your mom dressed for her big date, I don't regret it. I don't have to tolerate such disrespect, especially from my wife." "Dad," Andrea started, "this is more serious than you think. You won't like what I have to say, not one bit. But first, you need to know Mom is devastated. She's so remorseful, she can't stop crying. She deeply regrets hurting you. She couldn't stay longer than the weekend because she had to get back to work. I visited her twice. She just goes to work, forces herself to get through the day, and then returns home to an empty house. I don't feel anything for her after what she did to me," Zane replied. Andrea pulled 2 items from her large bag, a brown envelope and a standard letter-sized one. "Dad," Andrea said, picking up the smaller envelope, "this is Mom's apology letter. She knows you don't want to talk to her, and even if you did, she's not sure she can face you. She's so ashamed. I won't make you read it. You can toss it if you want, but here it is. Maybe you'll read it later." "What's in the big envelope?" Zane asked. "This is a detailed account of Mom's relationship with the guy she went on a date with. It's written with precision, at my request." "Why should I read it?" Zane asked. "I don't care." "It's not for you, Dad. It's for HR at Mom's job." "And why would they care what Bryce did on her own time with someone not from her company?" "Dad," Andrea said, taking Zane's hands with a sad look, "I need to tell you what happened after you kicked Mom out. It's going to hurt, but it's better coming from me. I told her to stay with you for the night. I didn't want her around. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to touch her again." "I know, Dad," Andrea said. "When she complained about the long drive, you told her to find a motel or hotel." "Right," Zane said. Mom was hurting, not just from the slaps, but she realized how much she'd messed up. No matter how angry you seemed, she knew she hurt you deeply. She was confused, too. One moment, you were helping her get ready for a date which went against your nature, and the next, you were striking her and scolding her. I didn't yell, Zane interrupted. I firmly told her I thought she was planning to cheat on me. She says she never meant to sleep with him, Andrea responded. She took the protection from your nightstand. I know, Dad, Andrea continued, but you couldn't see it differently? When Mom left, she was confused and regretful. She decided to meet the salesman as planned to tell him it was over, and then she was going to stay with me for the night. She still thought he was a friend at that point. Andrea continued, while Zane listened in silence. When she arrived at the hotel, she went straight to the ladies' room. Her makeup was a mess, and her cheeks were still red and puffy. Once she freshened up, she entered the restaurant where her date, Harvey, had already gotten a table. She didn't greet him with a hug or kiss, and he immediately knew something was wrong. She got right to the point, but before she could finish, she started crying. He tried to comfort her, hugging her and saying everything would be okay. He ordered a glass of wine to calm her down, and she drank it all at once, on an empty stomach. Harvey told her not to worry about their relationship and that he understood, but he implied you were too controlling. He then ordered a bottle of wine for the table and criticized you, Dad, saying no real man would ever strike a woman. The wine started to relax Mom, and she kept drinking more. Soon she felt the full effects of the booze. She told Harvey she needed to leave and drive to my house, but he said she wasn't fit to drive, and she probably wasn't. Mom said if she couldn't drive, she'd get a hotel room and go to my place in the morning. Harvey checked the front desk and told her the hotel was fully booked because of a convention. He then invited her to rest in his room for a few hours before leaving. She was so drunk she needed help just getting to the elevator. Andrea paused, watching her father's reaction, but Zane remained silent, his eyes narrowing as he listened. Once in Harvey's room, Andrea continued, he helped her to the bed, but then things took a turn. He went from helping her to kissing her neck. Mom pushed him away, angrily telling him their relationship was over. She just wanted to lie down for a few hours because she felt dizzy and nearly collapsed onto the bed. Harvey was kind enough to lift her feet onto the bed and take off her shoes. She remembers him massaging her legs, but she soon fell asleep. Zane sat in silence, his jaw tight, as Andrea went on. The next thing Mom remembers is Zex. It was over in seconds. She told me she thought it was you. She didn't realize she wasn't at home in your bed. Zane slammed his hand on the table. So she slept with him anyway, he exclaimed. Dad, Andrea interrupted. Mom didn't consent to having sex with him. Zane shook his head, his frustration growing. She dresses provocatively for a hot date, meets him at his hotel restaurant, they have drinks, and then she goes up to his room. Now she's claiming no consent. Is that really true? Yes, Dad, Andrea replied quietly. But that's not all. Early in the morning, as the light was just coming up, Mom woke to find an unclothed man next to her, his hand on her chest, trying to have sex with her again. She pushed him away and jumped out of bed. Now sober, but with a headache, she realized what had happened. Harvey had gotten her drunk and taken advantage of her while she slept. He tried again in the morning. She screamed at him, telling him she never wanted to see him again. He just laughed and said she didn't feel that way last night. Zane's face turned pale as he absorbed the information, while Andrea continued. Mom knew what had happened and felt ashamed for letting him lead her on for so long. She realized all he wanted was to get her into bed. She showered, cleaned up, and left the hotel. She hoped to find you at home and confess everything, to ask for your forgiveness. But when she got there, she saw you'd already moved out. Mom was consumed with guilt and shame. Zane leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed by what he had just heard. Andrea went on. Mom called me afterward and told me you strike her and kicked her out. She was still confused, but desperate to talk to you. When she came to my house, she was shaken, and it took a while for her to tell me the whole story. I believe her, Dad. Zane stared at the table before asking, what about the protective equipment she took from my nightstand? Was she planning to use that? She wasn't going to use it, Dad. She told me she took it because she thought it would make it easier to say no. It was just a safeguard she thought would help her resist, but she never intended to use it. Zane shook his head. That's hard to believe. It'll take a lot to convince me. Andrea took a deep breath. Dad, Mom has started seeing a counselor. She's trying to figure out what she did and why. The counselor suggested reaching out to you, but we knew you wouldn't want to participate. I've been going to the sessions with her to help understand everything. Zane stayed quiet for a long time before speaking. I'm not joining any counseling. Bryce made her bed. Now she has to lie in it. Andrea nodded and continued. Mom's HR department got involved. They reviewed her statement, consulted their lawyer, and decided maltreatment allegations against Harvey wouldn't stand. It was just a case of he said, she said. But they passed her account to Harvey's HR. Harvey admitted to having sex with Mom, but said it was consensual. Neither company wanted to pursue legal action, but Harvey's employer felt it was inappropriate for him to have a relationship with a married woman, and he was fired. Zane and Andrea sat in silence for a long time. Zane tried to process everything. He had thought time apart might help things between him and Bryce return to normal, but now everything had changed. She had actually slept with her so-called friend, and despite Andrea's explanation, Zane couldn't shake the feeling it might have been intentional. Unable to resolve the conflict inside, Zane made a decision. For now, he would do nothing. He would continue with his new life, avoiding Bryce. He spoke with Andrea from time to time, but she kept encouraging him to talk to his wife and work things out. Zane knew the wound would take time to heal, but divorce wasn't something he had seriously considered. Instead, he focused on renovating his new home and helping his neighbors improve theirs. As time went on, Zane gradually returned to his career, buying, renovating, and selling distressed properties. He transformed the cul-de-sac, even landscaping a small island in the middle to create a peaceful spot for neighbors to gather. The local women soon discovered Zane's poor cooking skills and, in appreciation for his efforts, began organizing meals for him, bringing casseroles, meatloaf, and other homemade dishes. Late one afternoon, as Zane reviewed a spreadsheet, there was a knock at the door. Without much thought, he saved his work and opened it. It wasn't one of his neighbors. It was Bryce. "Bryce," Zane said, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here. How did you find me?" Bryce didn't answer and instead asked, "Can I come in?" Much of Zane's anger had faded over time, and although surprised by her sudden appearance, he found himself saying, "Please, come in." Still taken aback, Zane noticed Bryce had dressed for the occasion, wearing a simple white sundress and matching flats. Her hair was down and she looked fresh and clean. Bryce entered, carrying several bags of groceries. "Where's the kitchen?" she asked. Zane pointed toward the kitchen door. Without hesitation, Bryce walked through, placed the bags on the counter, and returned to look around. "It's a little sparse, but nice. I think you've fixed whatever needed fixing," she commented. "I haven't finished all the renovations, but it's livable," Zane replied. "Can I get a tour?" Bryce asked. "Of course," Zane said, leading her through the living room, down the hallway, and through each bedroom. Finally, they reached the master bedroom. At each stop, Zane pointed out what he'd already done and what still needed attention. Bryce commented on the lack of closet space compared to their old home, to which Zane replied that it was more than enough for him. He didn't need much room. Bryce also noted the smaller bed. "It's big enough for me," Zane said. "Besides, a larger bed would overwhelm the room." Bryce made a few suggestions about curtains and carpeting. In the past, Zane had often used her ideas when renovating homes. He led her out through the new French doors into the screened patio. Bryce admired the cozy space and remarked, "This would be perfect for relaxing in the evening after dinner." "I often do," Zane said. "With a glass of my favorite strong red wine. It helps me sleep." Back in the living room, Zane gathered his thoughts. His wife's unexpected visit still puzzled him. "How did you find me?" he asked again. "It wasn't easy," Bryce admitted, "but I got some help from your colleagues at the real estate office. I drove by a few days ago and saw your car in the carport. I thought long and hard about disrupting your new life, but I needed to see you, even for a short while. So I decided to come over and cook dinner for you. I know you're a terrible cook, so I brought everything for a meatloaf dinner. I hoped you'd let me stay long enough to cook for you, and then I'd leave you alone. You can help in the kitchen or finish whatever you need to do, and I'll call you when dinner's ready." Zane agreed. "I have a spreadsheet to finish. I'll check in to see if you need help with dinner in a bit." When Zane came into the kitchen about 20 minutes later, Bryce was busy preparing the meal. She turned to him, teary-eyed, and said, "You don't really need my help, do you? Your fridge and freezer are stocked. I didn't find a single frozen dinner in your kitchen." "The neighborhood wives take good care of me when it comes to food," Zane explained. "I've helped a few neighbors with small projects to improve their homes, and they repay me with casseroles or brisket every now and then. But I'd love to have your meatloaf, and I appreciate you coming here to make it." "That's just an excuse to see you again," Bryce said softly. "I've missed you so much." If you've read my letter, you know how sorry I am for treating you so poorly. But I wanted to tell you in person how regretful I am. I was a foolish, middle-aged woman who thought she needed excitement after a younger man showed me some attention. I made a huge mistake." Zane sighed. "Bryce, I know you're sorry. Andrea told me what happened that night. At first, I thought you went through with it, but Andrea convinced me you were manipulated. I don't think she would lie to make you seem less guilty, but we don't need to rehash all of that tonight." Bryce nodded. "Dinner is ready," she said, changing the subject. "This meatloaf will last you for days. I hope you enjoy it." She picked up her purse and headed toward the door. "Wait," Zane said. "Won't you stay for dinner? I've set the table for 2. "No," Bryce replied. "I really wanted to see you, but I don't want to intrude on your new life. If it's okay, I'd like to come back next Friday and cook for you again." "That would be great," Zane said. "But next time, I'd like you to stay. We can have dinner together and enjoy a glass of wine on the patio." "I'd like that, Zane," Bryce said. "But I'll have to see how guilty I still feel," she replied, before walking out the door and driving away. After Bryce left, Zane felt an unexpected sense of loneliness. He had grown used to living on his own and had adjusted to not having his wife around, but after seeing her again, that loneliness crept back in. His feelings toward Bryce were complicated. He was still hurt and a bit angry that she had even considered going on a date with another man, but at the same time, he missed her. He missed their life together and the way things used to be. It was clear she was trying to be that person again. The following Friday evening, Bryce returned. This time, she brought steaks for Zane to grill while she prepared salad, potatoes, and vegetables. Zane was ready with a bottle of wine, and they started drinking it as they cooked. They ate outside on the patio at a small table set for 2. The conversation was light. Bryce asked about Zane's work and the houses he was renovating, while Zane asked about Bryce's day-to-day life. Bryce admitted she had more free time now. After work, she mostly read and had joined a book club. Zane asked about her job, but immediately regretted it when Bryce admitted she still felt uncomfortable there. No one had mentioned the incident with the salesman, but everyone knew. After a pleasant evening, Bryce once again declined staying longer, saying she didn't want to disrupt Zane's new life. However, she added that she looked forward to their weekly dinners, and Zane agreed it was a routine he wanted to keep. About 4 weeks after Bryce started coming over, Zane emailed her one Thursday. He let her know that his cul-de-sac was having a party on Saturday, so she didn't need to cook on Friday or bring anything. Bryce replied, saying she would bring a bowl of potato salad to the party. When Zane opened the door on Saturday afternoon, he was pleasantly surprised at how great Bryce looked. She wore a lovely summer dress with a modest neckline. They relaxed together before heading over to the party, which began around 3 p.m. Bryce explained that she wanted to make a good impression on the neighbors, but Zane knew she also wanted to look good for him. The party hosts were setting up tables, and neighbors brought out lounge chairs. One neighbor, an enthusiastic barbecue lover, was grilling steak, chicken, and sausage. Almost everyone contributed beer, wine, and other drinks, while Zane brought several bottles of his favorite dark red wine. As the neighbors arrived, Zane introduced Bryce. Many were surprised to learn he was married. Some even admitted they hadn't known. They asked why Zane and Bryce weren't living together, making the couple feel a bit awkward. Throughout the day, Zane received compliments on how beautiful and charming his wife was. Bryce, in turn, heard many stories about how much Zane had helped the neighborhood since moving in. Neighbors pointed out the improvements Zane had made to their homes, and though everyone worked hard, Bryce could see how much more pride they took in their homes since Zane's arrival. As the party progressed, the men gathered to talk sports while the women gravitated toward Bryce, asking about her relationship with Zane and why they weren't living together. Meanwhile, children played in the street, drawing with chalk on the pavement. By late evening, the party began winding down as parents took their kids home. Everyone helped clean up the leftovers. Zane carried some beach chairs back to his house, realizing he'd had quite a bit of wine. It was clear that Bryce was feeling tipsy as well. Once home, she started gathering her things to leave. "I don't think you should drive tonight," Zane said, noting how much she had drunk. "What should I do?" Bryce asked, not wanting to overstep by staying. "You can sleep in the guest room," he offered. "I have a t-shirt you can wear." "Thanks, Zane," Bryce said. "I don't want to cause any trouble." Zane went to his room and returned with a white t-shirt. Bryce took it, went into the guest room, and closed the door. As Zane was turning off the lights and adjusting the thermostat, he heard Bryce call his name. He turned to see her standing in the hallway, now wearing the t-shirt. The fabric clung to her curves, showing off her figure. Her bosoms were outlined, and her waist was still wrapped in a towel. "Zane," she said softly, "can you give me a good-night hug before I go to bed?" Zane was captivated by her. He had nearly forgotten how beautiful she was, and for a moment, he let go of all the anger he had been holding inside. He stepped forward and wrapped his arm around her waist. Bryce, in turn, wrapped her arms around his neck and rested her head on his shoulder. They held each other for only a few seconds before Bryce broke the hug and hurried back to the guest room without saying anything, closing the door behind her. Zane was almost relieved that the hug had been brief. He could feel his body reacting to her, and if the hug had lasted a few seconds longer, Bryce would have noticed it too. The next morning, Zane woke up with a mild hangover. Hearing the shower running, he realized Bryce was already awake. After taking some headache pills, he headed to the kitchen where he found Bryce making breakfast. She was cheerful, wearing a sundress, and preparing bacon, eggs, toast, juice, and coffee. "Your neighbors might bring you dinner," she said, "but it doesn't look like you get a good breakfast. All I found in the freezer were frozen breakfast sandwiches." "You're right," Zane admitted. "I usually just grab one of those or a protein shake before heading out." "It's such a nice morning," Bryce said, glancing outside. "Why don't we eat on the patio?" "That sounds good," Zane agreed, setting the table for two. When Bryce brought out the food, Zane pulled her chair out for her, and she smiled. "Thank you for last night and this morning. It's the happiest I've felt in a long time." "I feel the same way," Zane replied. Bryce took a deep breath, carefully testing the waters. She didn't want to push him, but needed to know how he felt. "Any idea when you might want to come home?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Zane thought for a moment before answering. "I don't know if I want to come back home." Bryce's face fell slightly, though she tried to hide it. His response made it clear he wasn't ready to pick up where they left off. "Well," she said softly, "I'll wait until you do. In the meantime, I'd love to keep coming over on Fridays to cook for you, if you don't mind." "I'd like that," Zane said. "You've always been the best cook." Bryce felt a sting at the comment, wondering if Zane only wanted her around for her cooking. But she also sensed that there was more, and he just wasn't ready to admit it yet. She decided not to rush him. The following Friday, Bryce returned. She looked stunning in a pink pleated skirt and a fitted cashmere sweater that showed off her figure. The skirt was short enough to reveal her legs, and the sweater hugged her chest. Zane greeted her at the door. "What's on the menu tonight?" he asked. "I brought marbled ribeye steaks," Bryce said, smiling. "I thought you could grill them while I make a salad with lettuce, tomatoes, avocado, and bacon. And I brought 2 bottles of red wine. Maybe we'll get so drunk that you'll ask me to stay again." Zane laughed, not fully realizing how their relationship was gradually evolving into something deeper. He still had lingering anger and wasn't sure how to bring it up without spoiling the evening. "We'll see how the night goes," Zane replied noncommittally as he fired up the grill. Bryce busied herself in the kitchen preparing the salad while Zane poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to her and took the other to the patio, leaving the bottle on the table. After a while, Bryce brought out the salad and Zane began grilling the steaks. "They'll be ready in about 10 minutes, he said, turning toward her. Bryce raised her wine glass. "To my hope that you'll let me back into your life," she said softly. The toast caught Zane off guard and he felt a bit embarrassed, unsure how to respond. "We'll talk later," he said, turning his attention back to the steaks. After a few awkward moments, Zane announced that the steaks were ready and they sat down to eat. Silence lingered for a while until Zane finally spoke. "I'm sorry things ended up this way," he said quietly. Bryce nearly choked on her food at his abrupt statement. She reached across the table, took Zane's hand, and said, "Thank you. I was so afraid you thought I slept with someone willingly and that you'd never forgive me." Zane's expression softened. "Sometimes I think that if I hadn't kicked you out, none of this would have happened." "None of this was your fault," Bryce replied, still holding his hand. "It was all on me. I let myself be charmed by a smooth-talking salesman. I'll never forgive myself for hurting you the way I did. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it if you'll let me." "Well," Zane said, lightening the mood, "lettuce is a good start." After dinner, once the dishes were cleaned up, Zane asked Bryce if she wanted to watch a movie. "Sure," she replied, smiling. "But you picked this time. I want to watch something you'd enjoy." "You know I'm into action movies," Zane teased. "They're usually full of violence, nudity, and strong language." "Perfect," Bryce said with a grin. "I'll watch chick flicks with my friends." Zane scrolled through Netflix, finally choosing an action-packed movie he thought they'd both enjoy. As it started, Bryce returned from the bathroom wearing his favorite rose-scented perfume. She sat close to him on the couch, so close that Zane could feel her warmth. Without asking, she gently rested her head on his chest. Zane instinctively put his arm around her shoulder, feeling a rush of conflicting emotions. He noticed her skirt had ridden up above mid-thigh, and the top buttons of her sweater were undone, revealing a fair amount of cleavage. Bryce had always been beautiful to Zane, and despite everything that had happened, he couldn't deny his attraction to her. The movie played, but Zane found it hard to concentrate. Soon, Bryce, nestled against him, fell asleep, her breathing soft and steady. He let her sleep until the movie ended, then gently shook her awake. "You're going to let me stay the night, aren't you?" she asked groggily as she got up. "I don't think I should drive home this late." "Yeah, you can stay," Zane agreed. "You know where the guest room is." Bryce smiled but didn't head to the guest room. Instead, she walked into the bathroom and came out a few minutes later wearing a black baby doll negligee that stunned Zane. It was the sexiest thing he'd ever seen her wear, leaving little to the imagination. "How do you like my new pajamas?" Bryce asked softly, her voice seductive as she posed in front of him. Zane couldn't take his eyes off her. "I like them," he said, his voice low. "I forgot how sexy you could be when you wanted to impress me." Encouraged by his words, Bryce walked up to Zane, wrapping her arms around his neck and pressing her body against his. "I don't want either of us to sleep alone tonight," she whispered in his ear. Zane could feel her body respond to his, and despite the unresolved tension between them, the desire he had for her surged back. "I know you haven't fully forgiven me," Bryce continued, her voice emotional, "but please don't let that stop you from enjoying this moment. You can do whatever you want with me. Anything." Any resistance Zane had disappeared. He kissed Bryce passionately, their lips locking in a heated embrace. He pushed her hair back and kissed her neck, eliciting soft moans from her. Zane picked her up and carried her to his bedroom, tossing her onto the bed. Bryce reached for him as he climbed on top of her. As they made love, Bryce thought to herself, "How could I have been so foolish to think any moment with someone else could compare to this?" She arched her back, pressing closer to him, feeling his intensity. That night, Zane and Bryce released months of pent-up emotions, going round after round before falling asleep in each other's arms. For Zane, it felt like all the sexual tension and anger had finally dissipated, and Bryce looked more beautiful and desirable than she had in years. The next morning, they sat together on the patio for breakfast. Bryce, glowing from the night before, took a deep breath before speaking. "Zane," she said softly, "I think you know how badly I feel about everything I did. I'll never do anything like that again, but we've been apart for almost 6 months. Don't you think it's time for us to live together again?" Zane paused, putting down his fork and wiping his mouth with a napkin. He looked out at the bright morning sun, thinking about her words. Then he turned back to Bryce and said, "I've thought about it, but I've made up my mind." Bryce's heart sank, waiting for him to explain. "First," Zane continued, "the old house is too big for me now. When the kids were growing up, it was perfect, but now, it's just too much. And honestly, I never really fit in with the neighbors. They're all college graduates, professionals. I barely finished high school. I don't have much in common with them." "But Zane," Bryce interrupted, "you've done so well. You make just as much as they do with your renovations. Our house is one of the nicest, thanks to your work." Zane shook his head. "What I'm saying is, this is my home now. This is where I want to be. These are the kind of neighbors I want. When this house is done, it'll be just the right size for me. I'm not going back to the old house." Bryce's face fell, her eyes filling with sadness. "Oh, Zane, that's not what I wanted to hear." She stood up quickly, trying to hide her disappointment. "I have to go," she said abruptly. In just a few minutes, Bryce gathered her things and left, leaving Zane feeling conflicted. He hadn't intended to hurt her, but deep down, he knew he didn't want to return to their old life. The new house and routine had become his comfort. For 2 weeks, Zane didn't hear from Bryce. Then, one Friday afternoon, there was a knock at his door. When he opened it, he was shocked to see Bryce standing there with 3 suitcases. "I have 2 more in the car," she said, walking in and setting down the luggage. "What's going on?" Zane asked, confused, as he helped her with the other suitcases. Bryce wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him passionately. "If you want to live in this house, then this is my house too," she declared. Zane stepped back, shaking his head. "Bryce, you won't like living here. There's barely enough space for your things, especially your clothes. In the old house, you filled every closet. Bryce smiled softly. I gave away almost everything. What I have left is in these suitcases, but you'll still need to find a way to create a bit more closet space. Zane sighed, knowing the master bedroom didn't have enough room. He had considered knocking down a wall to expand into his office, but hadn't made a decision yet. And your work? Zane asked. It's a long drive from here, and with traffic it'll be even worse. I don't have a job anymore, Bryce said calmly. I resigned. Zane blinked in surprise. Why? I was still the subject of office gossip, and some salespeople made indirect comments based on rumors, Bryce explained. Besides, you've always said you make enough for the both of us, so now I'm not working. I'll find other things to do. Zane looked at her doubtful. Bryce, you won't want to sit here all day. Most of the neighbors work. You'll be alone. I've thought about that, Bryce said. Maybe I'll do charity work. I have a degree in accounting and studied psychology. Plus, I speak some Spanish. I want to help broken families and misused women. But first, I need to fix our family. With that, Bryce hugged Zane tightly and kissed him again. Zane knew she was winning him over, and he wasn't sure how to stop her. I hope you didn't give away all your sexy cocktail dresses and heels, Zane whispered in her ear. I kept a few, Bryce replied, intrigued. Why? I was thinking we could go on a fancy date once a month, maybe more, Zane said. I wouldn't mind dressing up and going out dancing with a beautiful woman in a cocktail dress. Maybe even stay at a nice hotel afterward. Bryce's face lit up with joy. I love that, she said, kissing him passionately. Welcome home, Bryce, Zane whispered as he picked her up and carried her to the bedroom.